Her story deals with a subculture of heavy metal music that some feel is sending a dangerous message to your kids.
The forces of evil on the dark side of devil right.
And I want to talk tonight about the devil and demons and witches and wizards.
And we just mix it up with hardcore and aggression and come out with something we think's an original sound.
Loud, fast, heavy, you know.
Well, what do you got?
What do you got?
Welcome, everybody, to Riff Worship, where Dylan Adams, Austin Paulson, and I, Justin Swindle, talk about riffs. Sometimes we talk about albums without riffs, but we still like them.
Yeah.
But most of the time we talk about albums and songs with riffs. How are you fellas doing?
I'm great. We got an album full of riffs today. There ain't no shortage of riffs on this record.
Not a shortage of much of anything on this record. Like, it's loaded. It is packed to the fucking gills.
We're talking about Badmotorfinger by Soundgarden today. And before Austin asks the question that he always asks, I'll actually ask the two of you, why Badmotorfinger by Soundgarden?
It's the better record.
Wow.
God.
You came out of the gate.
It
It's the
was
better record.
I was going to ease into it, but he was just like, you know what?
It's the better
Here
one.
we go.
Tell me I'm wrong.
The glass breaks, the beers are being poured. Like, he just did it.
I don't think that's the case.
Before I answer, I want to flip the script on you and go, what made you pick Badmotorfinger over doing Superunknown?
I think Badmotorfinger has more riffs. I think Superunknown does have riffs.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
I don't think there is really a Soundgarden record without riffs, but I think Badmotorfinger has more. And I think it is like the first album that like Soundgarden really hit their stride and hit their sound. They like started sounding like Soundgarden.
Not to say that those other releases aren't bad. They're just
Loud
different.
Love is awesome.
Yeah. I would agree. I think this album has like some of the most memorable riffs or like just songwriting for me. I like Superunknown, but I think maybe this album just hit me at the right time. And I mean, even when you listen to it, re-listening to it, kind of gearing up for this episode, I mean, that whole first half of that record is just one after another. Like, it's
Fuck,
so
the first
good.
5 songs alone.
Yep.
Jesus.
And then, you know, they mostly, it's like mostly all the singles, right? For the most part. I mean, Rusty Cage, Outshine, like those are, you know, pretty big ones. I know we'll get into some of that later, but personally, I just think it's the superior album, personally. But I'm also right.
You know, so
What a piece of shit.
So it's remarkable because that was, I have been asked by you, Swindle, many times, like jokingly, what's your favorite Soundgarden record? And I've always said Badmotorfinger. And you're like, well, you're wrong. It's Superunknown. And that's basically, I'm paraphrasing, but that has been it for 15 years, essentially. Like, no, there's been points where Paulson's like, did he ask you the Soundgarden question? I was like, yeah. And he's like, how does he not say Badmotorfinger? And it's like, to what Austin said, I think this album just hit at a right time. I think I heard this not terribly long after I heard Dirt for the first time. So like it was going from like the heaviness of what Dirt was into this, which is like this lumbering, like just nasty, big sounding record.
Oh, it's thick. It's like syrup, man.
Yeah. And knowing that the two biggest singles off the album are the two opening tracks, it's like, oh God. And then like what I like about this album too is it's 12 songs. You can almost split it into different quarters and like you get a different vibe from each one. And I always thought Soundgarden was a punk band that liked Black Sabbath because there's still some very kind of arty punk stuff going on in this record. And there's still this like boo doo 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 doo, just this like kind of like Black Sabbath Volume 4 kind of thing going on with it.
There's like borderline doom, like pummeling
Oh
riffs.
my God.
Just so heavy.
Some St. Vitus-esque stuff. Just basically like, yeah, they shared a label together for a short amount of time. But like, yeah.
St. Vitus is the band that got them on SST.
That's
Is that right?
wild.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
It is.
That's so crazy.
I think in one of the interviews I watched or listened to, they talked about it for sure, but I think it was like either The Obsessed, it was definitely Wino, either The Obsessed or they were on tour with them, and they like basically talked to Greg Ginn or whoever at SST and were like, hey, we were just on tour with Soundgarden and they're really cool. You should like listen to them, check them out.
Did they eat pizza next to him?
I don't know, but we have.
Yeah.
God damn, we sure have.
we never talked to him, but we sure looked at him over a slice of saw.
He was
reading a newspaper with bifocals on.
Was sitting there, leaned back, like paper fully popped out like an old man, had his glasses down on his nose, just enjoying it. And like, we're like, God, what an experience.
R.I.P. Obies, man. What a place.
Yeah.
Jesus, Swindle's been assaulted there.
Have you really?
Sure.
Oh, God.
He sure was. That's not even a joke.
Oh, fuck. Well, I'm sorry.
It really wasn't an assault. This drunk woman just came in and like stole our pizza and then passed out in my lap, essentially.
Yeah.
But that was like always you never knew what was going to happen at that place, you know,
Truly.
with two venues, two like really big venues for like Nashville hardcore metal being right across the street from each other, and then a pizza place in the middle of it. You were going to end up there for sure.
Yeah.
And that shit is so close to Vanderbilt too.
Yeah.
Like, there's a college right down by that way.
Yep. Man, what a place. But yeah, I mean, this band itself has had like ties to some of the underground for a long time. You mentioned SST. Some of their earliest releases were on Sub Pop, who are still going today. Shit, one of the guys who was in the band lived with the founder of Sub Pop at one point. All three or two members of the band actually lived with
Pavitt. Bruce
yeah,
Pavitt?
I believe so. Yeah.
Yep.
So they have a long history with that label for sure. With those like first couple EPs and then the full length being released on SST. But their first major label deal would have been with Louder Than Love on A&M, right?
A&M.
So
That's that surprisingly, the first Soundgarden song I heard, I think was the title track from Louder Than Love. And that's a very like dense sounding song in its own right. But then hearing, years later, obviously I saw the video for Black Hole Sun. I think I saw that video when I was like 11 or some shit on like probably MTV2.
That much later after the song had come out? Because when you were 11, it was what, 2001 or something?
Yeah, 01. Yeah, my dad didn't listen to Soundgarden. But my dad knew like some of those bands. I was exposed to Pearl Jam probably before any of those other bands. But I didn't really grasp music that way till around that time, till I was around like 9, 10, 11. And I saw the video just on a whim and it kind of started to register a little bit. And I was probably in my later teens when I really started getting into Soundgarden, just because like I heard Nevermind, then I heard Dirt, then I heard this.
yeah.
I just can't say enough good things about this record. In particular, it's out of like the grunge records for me, it's my number 2.
What's the top?
Dirt.
Yeah.
Dirt has to be
Dirt.
for me. And it's a toss up. Just because it's all three of us, and I know Swindle has the same love for the band that I do. In Utero is my number 3. But like there have been points in time where like I could go number 3 could be Nevermind, just depending upon the mood. But it's definitely In Utero. Those are the top 3 for me.
Alice in Chains in this band definitely like stick out. And obviously we're more, well, or at least for Dylan and I would say, because, obviously Swindle maybe came from more of a hardcore background than you and I. But I think, as far as like being into metal and being into like hard rock, Alice in Chains and Soundgarden certainly were going to be like easy picks And yeah, if you're kind of, all right, which ones are like the riff heavy, it's Dirt and certainly this record. Which is kind of weird to think too. This band had probably been around for quite a while before this record really came out. I mean, they formed in like the
84?
mid 80s in Seattle, kind of from the ashes of like another project, the Shimps. Oh my God. As a kid who loved watching Three Stooges growing up.
Hey man,
you know,
it's a toss up between Shimp and Curly. Like, I
at least
love them both.
Still a brother.
It's still a brother.
Still a brother.
Yeah, I can't wait until we get our own personal Shimp once Dylan drops off the show. Old Curly.
It's the bald thing.
It's gonna be
CJ. God.
So you in the Shimps, you essentially have Chris Cornell, Hiro Yamamoto. Hiro eventually leaves, and then Kim Thale, who was originally from I want to say Park Forest, Illinois, moves out to Seattle, moves in with Hiro, and Bruce Pavitt, who later started Sub Pop Records, replaced Hiro in the Shimps. That band breaks up. Chris and Hiro start jamming together. Kim later kind of joins in with that as well, and that kind of sets the ball in motion for Soundgarden. But Swindle, you were kind of saying off air, I had no idea about this. Chris was on drums initially?
Yeah, Chris, when the band started, Chris did drums and vocals at the same time, which is wild for a drummer.
God, what a multi-talented motherfucker.
Yeah.
And to boot, the dude was good looking. Like, Jesus Christ. It's like, good God, come on.
Yeah.
Like, come on.
It like the Louder Than Love cover where it's just like chiseled like from marble. And then you hear the vocal range on the guy and the riffs that are being played. The songwriting. Oh, incredible.
Actually, in one of the interviews, I think it was that like the story of every song on Badmotorfinger.
Mm-hmm.
Chris was like, yeah, I kind of was still learning the guitar at this point. Because he wasn't a guitar player. He like played drums.
That's ridiculous.
Hey man, I have these songs. What do you have? Fuck. Okay.
Fucking Rusty Cage.
Jesus. Rusty Cage outshined. Like, just kind of fucking around. Like,
yeah. What a jerk.
Damn it. What a dick nose.
Artist that
R.I.P.
God. Seriously, like I hate the guy so much, but God almighty. God, I love him.
It's kind of interesting to see these musicians, you know, it's not exclusive to this band, but, you know, looking at their trajectory and their story kind of coming up in an era, you know, I know they have a lot of ties to like the hair metal stuff as many of these bands did at the time, but they were able to kind of, you know, transcend that through maybe a new sound.
Traverse those waters.
We touched on this in another episode where we kind of note that many times you watch a documentary, you read a book, they'll say like, oh man, grunge was the nail in the coffin for hair metal. But I think that genre, while there are aspects of it that I like, some bands that I enjoy listening to, I feel like it was kind of, it had an expiration date. Like some of that stuff, it really, the 10-year mark, you really just couldn't go past that. At a certain point, it kind of overstays its welcome. And so I think it really only kind of has itself to blame in a lot of ways. But then, you know, this is what did it in. Like, oh, this is no frills. It's just good music without the kind of, I don't know, bloated element of it.
That's it. You went from kind of bloated stuff like Extreme, and then you got to Soundgarden, which was like, it was real. A lot of the grunge stuff was real, right? Like the world isn't this polished, wonderful place. Like, it is very evident that it is, you know, an 80-20 with like, you know, the world's pretty messed up, but there's just a small glimmer of just like enjoyment. And that's kind of what the grunge movement did. Like, yeah, everyone's going to make jokes about flannel shirts and drugs and all that, but who gives a shit? The reason those dudes were wearing flannel that were from Seattle is it was fucking cold.
You know, you brought up Enter Sandman. Apparently, I never heard the story before. I only read it. It was in a Guitar World interview. Apparently, Kirk wrote the riff to Enter Sandman after listening to Louder Than Love.
Really? Wow. They'll come back up in this episode for sure.
We were talking off air about this, and Swindle brought up the fact that Nirvana's Nevermind came out like 2 weeks before this record, which was this album's original release date, that being September 24th, 91. That same day that Nevermind came out, Blood Sugar Sex Magic by the Red Hot Chili Peppers came out. A couple weeks prior to that, Pearl Jam's 10 came out. And if we're talking about the Black Album came out like a month and a half before this. Like, all those are 91 records. And then I think, if you go back like a year before that, like Alice in Chains' first record was out. And I think Dirt was out just a few months later.
Kind of another Sub Pop tie-in with Nirvana there. That Bleach was on Sub Pop. This was a big year for the style of music for sure, with all the releases you just mentioned. And kind of heading into this record, it was kind of a difficult time. I think right after Louder Than Love, Hiro, their founding member of the group, basically leaves. And I think, from what I understand, just reading some articles on this, maybe the writing was on the wall that, hey, maybe we're onto something here. If we want to get to the next level, there's going to be a lot of energy and time spent on this band. We're going to be out on the road a lot. And maybe that wasn't something that he was prepared to necessarily commit to. So he ends up leaving the band. And, to lose a member like that, a pretty pivotal member in songwriting, and, he's there from the beginning. It's, how are you going to replace that? How are you going to fill the big shoes that, Hiro had left? So they get immediate to auditioning people. And I think it gets narrowed down to two people in particular.
Yes. That being one Jason Everman and one Ben Shepherd. Jason Everman, if you're familiar with kind of the grunge movement or anything like that, was in Nirvana for a very short amount of time. He played second guitar, I guess, during the Bleach touring cycle, although he is actually on the cover of the Bleach album. He didn't actually play on the record, I believe.
He's credited on it, but he doesn't.
That's correct. Yeah. Yes, that is absolutely correct. And they parted ways with him, and I think a lot of those guys knew each other. It seems like Ben knew him in high school, or a significant other knew him in high school, and I think Ben was even present to like some of the early Nirvana like practices as well.
Yeah, I think so. It's funny you say that, because basically, I think Kim was at a show, met up with, or like ran into Ben and was like, "Hey, Hiro's left the band. Would you mind trying out for it?" And apparently Nirvana had approached Ben to possibly try out for that second guitar slot as well, like maybe the night before. And, this would be for the bass spot. So I did read a couple things where Ben was basically out at the Nirvana practice space, kind of on bass, trying to learn some of these songs. And, he'd never played bass before. He was a guitar player. They ended up going with Jason, because it seemed like the more kind of logical step. Maybe he just knew what the band was going for. Maybe he knew the songs a little better. But in the moment, it seemed like the more like strategic option to go with Jason, so they could get right back to touring again. They toured with Jason for practically like a year straight. But I think while on the road, it became clear like maybe the dynamics weren't there. They maybe attempted to write some stuff on the road, but there wasn't any ideas being formulated while they were out on the road with Jason. So when they got back, they ended up going to Ben and asking him to join the band officially.
And it was his favorite band. Apparently Soundgarden was his favorite band. So, there you go. Kind of rock star shit there. You mentioned the big shoes he had to fill. It's a big man. He is not a little fella. So big shoes, big man, easy fit. There you go.
He was much younger than some of these guys. So he's like the little brother figure in a group of, the older guys. You're being called up to the big leagues now, and they take him under their wing and show him the ropes. And, I think in a time where maybe some of the wind was kind of sucked out with Hiro leaving, Ben seems to have added kind of like a fresh perspective or a lot of like new energy, new life into the band at this time.
I mean, it turned out to be a great move because he stayed with the band until
the very end.
the end. Yeah.
Yeah.
Till
So
the
they
very
picked the right
end.
guy.
I think Kim pointed out that the songs got weirder and faster with Ben coming on. I mean, first album in, you have a writing credit already, and that says something. You know, when you're kind of a newer guy, you know, especially in a band that's pretty well established, you're going to get probably like, hey, we're going to take care of this. You know, maybe the next go around you can bring something in. But they were adamant of like, help write, please. Like, here, you know, come in. This is all four of us, not just one and the rest of us. You know, everybody's got writing credits on this record.
They do, which is a good thing to point out too, because I mentioned, you know, with Ben coming in, it's kind of like you get like a second wind, some new energy. They basically had exhausted all of their songs from their, you know, vault of, you know, what to use. They'd used it all on the previous releases, which, you know, it's not necessarily a bad thing. Now you kind of just get to start from scratch and just really kind of play around and experiment, which they definitely did on this record. You know, it seemed like before they were more prone to debut songs live while playing and then kind of working out what, you know, an audience might think what they like. They were kind of good at kind of adjusting or altering things, you know, in accordance to that. But with this record, they didn't really have that luxury. So now they're kind of having to just go off of their own instincts and their gut and write what they think works for this record.
Well, sometimes your gut is right. And for this record, gut was right. It was, you know, sometimes when you're writing, you can get caught up in, well, this part's got to play like this, so it's impactful this way, or, you know, we can only play this one riff 6 times rather than 8. So it, you know, it doesn't affect this part. And sometimes songs can just be written like that and you can keep going. Like the song plays itself. It works out that way. It happens. And that's not to say this band didn't go over everything, and then play it out to see what worked and maybe what didn't work. But for whatever reason, these 12 songs, all work really well.
They wrote a lot. They wrote or Chris especially, like during the period leading up to the album, he wrote so much music, a lot of the foundational pieces for this record. He ended up writing like a demo that ended up in a movie called Singles, which
Big soundtrack.
I
Big
never
soundtrack.
saw the movie,
Mhm.
but it's like a Cameron Crowe flick where it's literally just people in Seattle. It's like coming of age film of people finding love and success in grunge music in the 90s. It's got Matt Dillon and Bill and Bridget Pullman in it. I want to say, there's a couple. Who's the kid from Mask?
Jim Carrey.
Oh,
Not that
no.
Mask.
God, I know who you're talking about.
That's whatever.
Cher.
Yeah, it's Cher.
Yeah.
Cher. And then also wrote a lot of what would become a Temple of the Dog as well during this
Damn.
period. He's working on Badmotorfinger, but he's also not, you know, he's just writing all the time. And even if it doesn't fit one thing, he's kind of using it as another thing. He's just challenging himself all the time to kind of like write in different styles or different tunings. And it seemed like everybody had like a 4-track cassette, machine like handy at all times. Like everybody, when I was like reading some of these articles, it seems like everyone is just like bringing things they're working on at all times. Like, I'm at home. I'm just writing a riff. Here's like a part of it. Like, see what you guys can do with this.
You could say he was hungry for writing and hungry for riffs.
He was going hungry. For sure.
Thank you. Someone caught that. I'm a chud.
Yes.
That's a little Temple of the Dog reference for you, Austin.
Could you imagine, you know, walking into a band situation now and someone's got a fucking 4-track? Because like, yeah, phones, we've got everything. We can hum things, tap things out, whatever. But like walking in, there's a 4-track and like, hey, here's this almost completed thing that I've got done, and going, okay, all right. Now we'd see a 4-track and go, how the fuck do I upload this to Pro Tools? How do I put it in Logic? How do I get it so I can like sit and learn it? It's wild to think that he was that prolific with writing, of like specifically that time frame, that like 91, probably late 89 into 91, and seeing how much music came out, because I typically forget about that Temple of the Dog record. It's there. I know the singles that came off of that. But it's funny to think that he wrote most of that music. And just knowing that he spent all that time writing, and then him just like shrugging it off is like, I just kind of bored, just learning how to play.
And also like the shit that inspires him is hilarious on guitar too. Like what's fucking Mind Riot is the song on this album that every string is tuned to fucking E.
Yeah.
And the reason that's a thing is because like one of the dudes from Pearl Jam or Temple of the Dog, because it's like the same band essentially, was like, just, I don't know, they were probably like hanging out, broing out or whatever. And the dude from Temple of the Dog was like, wouldn't it be really stupid to just like tune all of your strings to the same note and write a song like that? And Chris was like, stupid, yes, wouldn't that be stupid? So he wrote a fucking Soundgarden song just based on his friend being like, oh.
Yeah, like on paper it sounds dumb, but it makes for unique challenges in songwriting, right? Like we might as well give it a shot. Why not? And see what I can do. Yeah, that does sound kind of ridiculous, but maybe something comes out of it, and it did. A lot of it did.
That's the Velvet Underground thing, isn't it? The ostrich tuning. That
is that what they call it?
Seriously. You may have to check this, but I'm pretty sure Lou Reed tuned one of his guitars E all the way down, and like wrote, I can't remember, the track may be called The Ostrich. And it's, yeah, that's the first time I heard of it. So when I read it on here, I was like, oh, it's the Velvet Underground thing.
I think they certainly got, you mentioned Velvet Underground. I could see maybe like Chris Cornell being into some of that stuff for sure.
Apparently Lou Reed's guitar was all D's.
That's cool.
Close.
Hey,
close.
Close enough, right?
Yep.
Apparently the song is All Tomorrow's Parties.
Okay.
I love that band. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I heard that and like tuned one of my guitars that way one time just to like see it. I was like, this is fucking bonkers. Like how does it was an acoustic, so like it doesn't matter, but it's like, how does what?
Yeah, who knew Dylan was such a Lou Reed fan?
Yeah, loves it. Loves
big Velvet Underground head.
Yeah, I like that noisy record he did.
All the players on this record, the members of the band at the time, you know, it's just everybody has moments to shine.
Yeah.
I mean, from Chris to Kim, Matt Cameron, Ben Shepherd. You know, I especially think of Chris. One thing that really stands out about this record, and every time I've listened to it, where it's like in the car and I'm by myself, and you try to sing along to some of that stuff and really try to match it, like your vocals, they're almost you try to hit those notes and you're just immediately just like
fucking like, slaves and bulldozers.
Oh my God, he's singing so loud and
dude,
so
he
high.
Is screaming, and it's like, how? Like it goes from, he modulates, right? So it goes from like one range, and then it's just like, like through the roof.
Insane.
It's like a tall dude standing up.
The notes that he is able to hit on this record, and you know, from what I understand, it was like difficult to capture. It was like he had to work at it, but what came through on the album, insane.
Jesus.
In one of the interviews, it's a different song on a different album, but he was like, yeah, I would find myself like when we were playing some of the songs live, like not being able to play guitar, and I didn't realize why. And then one day it hit me. It's because couldn't breathe. Like I was losing oxygen because I was singing so high. I like couldn't play the guitar while I was singing. And it was Limo Wreck from fucking Superunknown.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
But yeah, just even, attempt it, and you're like struggling most people would struggle to hit notes like that. And he is able to just really just carry over some of these riffs and the songs. Like
He was doing it on the early records.
Yeah.
It's not like, oh, he learned how to do this. It was like, okay. The Screaming Life EP, like he was doing this shit.
Yeah.
Like, come on.
We should also note the production of this record, why it sounds so good as well. Terry Date, who is a local Seattle producer, engineer. I guess the band had known some of his work because of the Metal Church records that he had done. He had experience, basically. He's a local guy. He has experience working on major label records. So they thought, all right, let's check this guy out. He had worked with them on Louder Than Love. But like I mentioned, he worked with Metal Church. He's worked with Dark Angel, Dream Theater, Overkill, Pantera, Prong, Unearthed, White Zombie, and Sir Mix-a-Lot, apparently.
Deftones.
There you go,
Deftones.
Deftones. Apparently Terry's first gold record was the Sir Mix-a-Lot record that he worked on, apparently.
Terry is like, I've listened to interviews with just Terry, like talking about production. It's wild. It's wild what he wants. Like, he's very prone to get these real sounding performances out of people. And like, obviously the Pantera records are a big deal there for the later years, especially like kind of metal knuckleheads like us. But he talked about how the Pantera years took like 10 years off his life from all the fucking Coors Light. But God, he's got great production. I'm sure he helped out on the remaster they did for the 25th anniversary for this album, which sounds amazing. Some remasters are a little like, they just do it to like get more money out of it. But this one, in my opinion, needed it. A lot of records in the early 90s, like they mixed the bass guitar really low. So they sounded thin. Like you didn't even get the presence of it. And doing a remaster on that, where like, you can actually hear the bass. Like I remember listening to the remaster recently and going, oh shit, like I can actually hear the bass parts in this. Figuring out what was, as a kid, trying to figure out how to learn Rusty Cage is like, what the fuck am I doing? How do I figure this out? So like Terry Date's the fucking GOAT.
A kind of anecdote to tie it into last week, I think, or not last week, but the I Hate God episode. I think on one of the more recent I Hate God records, Mike 9 was talking to Phil, and Phil was like, yeah, Terry used to get me to sing for like 6 hours a day to get ready to do like Pantera recording. And Mike, when Phil told Mike 9 that, Mike was like, I can't sing like this for 6 hours a day. Like, there's no fucking way I can do that.
God, 15 minutes. That's what you got.
That's it. Straight from the hip.
Straight. What do you do for the other 45?
Mike 9's got to record a record in like 5 days just because he can only do 10 minutes at a time.
So they recorded this record during the spring of 91, but they had been rehearsing this since like mid-January up until the actual recording sessions, which were kind of split up between California and Woodinville, Washington. So they did the drums mostly in California. I think there might be a couple tracks on the album where they did everything in Washington, but the Bear Creek Studios seemed like a good time to be. It's like basically like this rural area. They would, record, but then you can go outside and, play. They made up like some Nerf game or some shit like that. I read where they're just, the points don't make sense, but they also don't matter. And they mentioned something about Chris would basically have a mountain bike. Like, talk about this guy being shredded. This dude would like take his bike from like West Seattle or some shit like that and come out to like miles. I think it was like 15-mile track from the city to the recording studio. He'd do that every day.
And that's when he would write some of his somehow he would either, I don't know if he was recording himself singing or something, but that's when he would like write out some of his lyrics or like melodies or something like that.
That's rad. Where you like have that in your head just during, you know, some alone time, like on your bike or whatever. Which kind of comes into play with the first song on the album, Rusty Cage. I guess, you know, if you're in a van for long periods of time and maybe you're just kind of alone with your thoughts, you might as well use it to kind of construct some lyrical content. But yeah, Rusty Cage, I guess, was basically Chris being in a van while they're in Europe, and he had thought about some of the lyrics to Rusty Cage. They come back, and then you essentially try to form like music around it. And I guess the inspiration for it would be, wouldn't you guess it, some Black Sabbath. He was like, yeah, I wanted to write some like hillbilly Black Sabbath crossover.
Yeah, I love that.
Apparently he was also listening to a lot of Tom Waits at the time. So they were like, how would we approach the same sort of themes from the Soundgarden point of view? And so thus you have Rusty Cage, which I guess, would that just be about a van or a vehicle or some shit? That's
hearing the lyrics now after reading that, and just hearing like, you hit me with a hand of broken nails and like all this. It's like, okay, I could definitely see that from like something off of Swordfish Trombones, or, you know, what's the 2 shots from a 30-06? I think that's that's a Waits track.
16 Shells.
So, yeah, thank you. That's a pretty wild fucking song, but like I could definitely see that in this track now.
It seems like there's a lot of weird inspiration for this record, you know, outside of, you know, maybe your Black Sabbaths or Led Zeppelin. I mean, Ben mentions that he listened to Minutemen every day and a Duke Ellington record in, you know, kind of around the time of recording. So, which is really cool. You wouldn't think like some of that.
Oh, he's a punk dude.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yep.
There was a funny story. The bassist was talking about that, and he was like, Terry may have been like, it's why do you want your bass to sound like a fretless bass? Because the bassist went into the recording being like, yeah, I want my bass to sound fretless for like the whole thing. And one of the songs he would like, they actually gave him a fretless bass and was like, play this for this song. And he was like, I don't want to play a fretless bass. I just want it to sound like I'm playing a fretless bass. And it's because they'd been listening to the Duke Ellington record.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
That's I read an interview with him, like in Guitar World used to have a bass offshoot magazine called Bass Guitar, and they did an interview with Ben in it, and he repeated that same statement. He's like, you can make any bass sound like a fretless on how you play it. And I went, that's logical. Like I understand that, but like it's interesting for him to say that because he hangs his basses down to his fucking knees.
Oh, yeah.
Like there's shots of him just like holding the neck next to his neck, and he's just playing. He's not a little dude. He's not. He's like, he's almost Novoselic's height, like Chris from Nirvana. Like they're big dudes. And he's like hitting that thing like he's an orangutan, just like a gorilla. One thing about Rusty Cage I want to bring up too is upon learning how to play a track like this when you're a kid, you're like, oh, everything's in standard tuning. Not this fucking song. The
this album.
The bass is in drop D. The guitars are in drop B, in traditional drop B, not like drop D tuned down a step and a half. It's like you take the B and you take the E string and you tune it down to B. So like Swindle, you might be familiar with like Black Label Society doing that. And for me, it was like the first time I heard a tuning similar to that was when I first heard Mastodon. I heard March of the Fire Ants. That's where they took it from. They took it from Soundgarden. They just happened to be tuned down a further step. And it adds to the song without it being a gimmick. Like, you know, there's that lower register there, but it doesn't just sound like a low rumble or something like that. It's actually very musical in how they do it.
Yeah, if you were a kid in 1991 that was trying to sit down and play an instrument by ear, and you picked this album to fucking do it, I'm sorry. I'm sorry you gave up guitar after that.
7 tunings on this record?
Oh, it's so funny. Well, also trying to keep up with the random odd meters on this song in particular too, which, you know, I don't know if they had really dabbled with much by this point, but this record, all there's so many weird like time signatures and shit. and I know this song apparently was just complete accident. Like they didn't know what they were doing, but it felt good and it worked out.
When odd time signatures and odd meters are used right, they work really well. Sometimes bands can do that and it's forced sounding. You know, if it's kind of like, oh, it just transitions to 7 really well, or this riff's in 7/4, which transitions to 4 really well. That's like the Pink Floyd thing. You know, I think Pink Floyd's considered the most successful song in 7/4 or something like that.
Money.
But it's not the fucking heaviest song in 7/4. That's Outshined.
Outshined. 7/4.
That's Outshined.
Yeah. Which I guess they also use on Spoon Man too.
Mhm.
Yeah.
They sure do.
So great song.
Outshined. This song's obviously in like drop D. I think that's kind of like the standard tuning of the record because most of there's more songs in that or a variation of drop D on the record. What I like about this song is there's a point almost at the song is almost over. It's about to kick into its last chorus where the band is playing. There's a transition there that's fucking wild. And it's like, it sounds like the band's kind of fallen off and then it just completely slams into the part and goes next to it. It's like, God damn it. How is this band doing this? Like, that's just a very well-oiled machine that can do something like that. A very practiced band. This was I love the video of this song. I think it's cool as shit with all like the gears and the metalworks. I love Terminator 2, so it kind of looks that way. I love this song.
It's got 2 videos.
I didn't know.
Technically has 2 videos. The one I think that ultimately ended up on MTV, which I guess the band did not really enjoy. They felt like maybe the director, who is Matt Mahurin. I don't really know how to pronounce that, so I apologize. But they say he was spending too much time on another video he was directing, which would have been Metallica's Unforgiven. So maybe
I can see that.
They weren't too pleased with the initial outcome, but I guess they had sent the band this alternate take, and they like that version much more.
Isn't that Dylan's favorite Metallica song?
He loves that, and he loves
Nothing Else Matters.
Yeah.
Okay.
I love The Unforgiven. That's a badass song. We won't talk about that other song. It doesn't exist.
But also, before we get too far from it, going back to Rusty Cage, that song is so fucking fast. And then at the end of it, they just slam the fucking brakes and play the slowest breakdown, like,
oh,
ever.
yeah. Yes.
And it's just so heavy and so slow coming from 9,000 miles an hour.
I would be so amiss if I didn't mention this. The first time I heard Rusty Cage, it wasn't Soundgarden. It was the Johnny Cash
version.
Yep, it was the Johnny Cash version, which was I think on American Recordings 3, maybe. Which is kind of funny to hear him do it, like a lot of those covers that he did. Because I was like, oh, I'm sure this song sounds like this, like a folky kind of song, and then I heard it and went, oh no.
I must have heard like Rusty Cage on alternative radio in the 90s or whatever. I didn't hear the breakdown until an adult. I just heard like that bridge going up to the bridge, or like they did the chorus again at the end, and that's where like alternative radio cut it out. So when I like got the CD or whatever, or it actually may have been fucking Grand Theft Auto
San Andreas.
That song was on that soundtrack, and when I heard it the first time on there, it had the breakdown at the end, and I just like, I probably just like threw the controller and was like, "What is this? What happened?
What's this extra bit?" I love that. Well, and this kind of ties into the next song too, "Slaves and Bulldozers," which definitely is just like a Doom riff. Like this is just fucking Doom. It is thick.
What was that?
What did he do? Oh, he's like a fish.
This fucking song is,
it's one riff.
It's great.
God
One
damn it.
riff all the way through.
It is like that driving bass line throughout the whole song.
Yeah.
When it gets to that fucking part and those vocals just rich up like that, I was running the neighborhood yesterday and I heard that part and just stopped and like had to listen like, fuck.
there's a lot of these moments on the record too where you kind of almost forget where you're at for a second because it just unfolds into this jam, right? It's very hypnotic kind of sounding thing, and that's exactly where this song goes, where it starts heavy and then you're into these like more like kind of sparse sounding jam parts of the record. Not to say that they aren't just, man, it is a groove. Chris also just screaming at one point during this song. Vocals definitely a standout part of this track, especially. But perhaps my favorite song on the entire record is this song.
It's my favorite single off the record.
Every radio shift I had when I went to Western Kentucky, I played this song like every shift. So if you listened in Bowling Green and you heard the song on Revolution 91.7, I was likely behind the board when this song was playing. But yeah, Jesus Christ Pose for sure, standout single on the album.
Were you there when the reissue of this album came out, or were you there well before?
It may have been because of that. It may have, because when was the reissue?
Hold on.
I have it. 2016, I believe.
I would have been before that.
Oh no, I actually have Superunknown. Never mind. I was gonna say I have the Revolution 91.7 fucking CD copy. I thought it was.
That's amazing.
This came from Big Mike gave me this copy of the CD.
That's so funny. And you know they always used to say like, oh, you can't give that stuff away. But I still have a bunch of stuff from working there because that was a point when they were still like sending you CDs in the mail to play on it. I had like the Down EP. I had Newstead came out. I think I had like a record by The Sword or something. Whatever the most recent Down EP that came out that was supposed to be multiple. 4 of them. Yeah.
There were, anytime I went up there when you were recording and I would go up there, I was always looking for something to fucking gank. Yeah. I was like, surely something here is like, I'm going to take something. I never did. I wish I would have. It had already been picked clean.
It was so funny because they had like a tub of stuff that they were just like didn't care about, like in the break room or the lot or the whatever. There was just a tub full of stuff that they weren't using, and you could very easily just take some of that stuff. But I would always play Jesus Christ Pose because there's so much about the song I like where it starts out with the drums, which are just kind of so primal and fun. A lot of this record is so rhythmic, not just the drums, but the guitar. But there is that guitar line that it almost like feels like a tape just, skipping
this
back and forth.
This is a very industrial sounding track without being an industrial track.
Yes, I completely agree. That guitar line, it almost, and this happens a couple times on the record too, where the guitar line almost feels like it's just a separate voice, and it's like it almost is like talking to you in a way. Like it's this weird pitch, this like the way it's being played, it almost feels like its own voice part to me.
Widdly wah.
Widdly wah. Yeah, dude, it does sound like Carl from I would recreate that part like Carl from Aqua Teen.
Hey, Fryman.
Widdly wah. Widdly wah. I want to.
Is that what you were just dying about?
Yes, that's exactly what I was dying
I put it in the notes and I was like, I would do that. Like, it's got the widdly wah part.
My lovely girlfriend just watched that episode with me. I was like, I need to show you Aqua Teen Hunger Force. And I found that episode and was like, this will be the one to show her.
Yeah, I wrote the song. It's called I Want to Rock Your Body.
To the Break of Dawn.
In parentheses, to the brink of dawn.
And she looks at me after it's over. She's like, what did we just watch?
Yeah, there's a lot of that.
Then she was like, we're going to have to ease into that one. I go, perfect. The 12-minute episodes.
That's true.
I love unabashedly this track. I like the video because it's like they're out in like a desert kind of valley setting. And I think the colors are inverted a little bit on it. It's a fucking cool track. And it's like, to me, kind of of all the tracks on the album, because this is a very varied sounding album, this is probably the most different sounding track to me. With just like how it's paced, how it does sound like a loop kind of the entire time. It is very like experimental in that, but I think it's so fucking cool.
Every time I hear it, I feel like he's gonna blow out his voice because of how high the register
beginnings
of which he's singing. It's so crazy.
This was the song that kind of hit me the most with his vocals. I thought like his vocals were like super present in the mix, very high up, and he's also like fucking belting. And also a thing about this is like the song is not about like anti-Christian beliefs or whatever, but that like in 91, that's what like everyone shortly after like PMRC shit and like the Christian scare of like the 80s with Satanism, people thought like Soundgarden were making a song about the devil or like some anti-Christian sentiment. But there also was like the song title Holy Water, which if people didn't pay attention, and then at the beginning of fucking Searching with My Good Eye Closed, there's that like speak and see part where like it's like the devil says, and so like they had so many. And there's another song that had like a witch chant in it, Room 1,000 Miles Wide has like the tomorrow begets tomorrow, tomorrow,
which they said in the article, I think through Spin, they were like, yeah, I think it was from that movie, that silent movie Haxon or Haxon or whatever, how you pronounce it. I guess it ended up being from like a book from the like late 1800s or something like that. But yeah, you know, maybe it's just because it's like explicitly says Jesus in the title that like, well, this clearly this band is making a statement or something. You know, I think I read too where they got like death threats like during their European tour.
Yeah,
crazy. But it's really, it's like partially about Perry Farrell, kind of, or at least inspired by Perry Farrell from Born for Pyros and Jane's Addiction, where there was just a picture of him on a bed, kind of like spread out a little bit, and so he's kind of, I don't even know if he was trying to recreate like a Christ pose, but that's how it happened, I guess.
All spread eagle beagle, just sitting there.
This is also the only song, you know, there's a lot of writing from each member of the band, but this is like the only song on the record where I think all four members are credited together.
Yeah, you're right. I guess now we start to dig into the, you know, kind of middle of the album here. You know, Face Pollution, another track with weird meters and weird time. The fucker's in 9. Which is not necessarily a very common time used even for like bands that kind of go back and forth. You know, it adds a odd vibe to the song, kind of a very slick kind of sounding vibe, like a slidey riff. I mean, it's a fast one too. It's a little bit quicker in pace. It's also got that lovely ska section with the horns.
Yeah, it's weird. It's like, it sounds like, yes, the ska part is funny, but I almost like interpreted that part to be almost like new wave of British heavy metal kind of style of playing in that section too with the guitars. Just the way it was kind of layered. I don't know, but
so there's a later era Dillinger Escape Plan track called Milk Lizard. It's on their Ironworks album, and it's got horns in it, and it's very reminiscent. Like the horns have a very similar tonality to it as that. So that hit me in the head when I heard it. Somewhere.
The bridge for Face Pollution is fucking wild.
Yeah, that's a prog riff. Again, it shows like a band that just wanted to. I know Kim is quoted as saying like, I didn't write these songs to be that way. I just wanted them to be a little bit different and kind of quirky. So it wasn't just like 4/4 the entire time.
I think the bassist wrote Face Pollution. Ben's the bassist, right?
I think you're right.
If he didn't write the whole song, he did at least write the bridge.
I think he helped write the next track as well, which is Somewhere. I think he's got writing credits on that one as well. Somewhere, the only thing I dislike about it is the opening vocal line.
Okay, like with the phaser kind of vocal effect.
It's a little, the phaser doesn't bother me. I think it's just how like the vocals are kind of presented there. That's it. But like other than that, like the track is flawless.
Somewhere was the song for me that the bass stood out the most.
there's a couple songs on the back portion of the record that it definitely does. Like he really sticks out hard. But I think this might be the track you're thinking of. There's some really melodic kind of like jazzy-esque lines in it. So I think it's somewhere. And if he did co-write that one, that would make sense.
The end of the song is another like kind of trippy, spacey ending where they kind of just like jam out on one chord almost.
Yeah,
like,
they got like the harmonic kind of thing. It like fades out, fades back in, and then fades out again or whatever. I got some like Led Zeppelin vibes on this track for when I listened to it a little bit.
What era?
Good question. What's your favorite era?
The one at the end.
I love it. Another really fucking thick ass track.
Yep.
Very cavernous reverb on these vocals as well. Searching with My Good Eye Closed, which we kind of mentioned with the speak and spell kind of weird
I love
intro. Very cool. Little vocal layering as well in the beginning there. I don't know if this is the scale. Is it like, it almost kind of sounds like Phrygian. Like it sounds very, I don't know, like almost like an Eastern scale when I heard it.
Is it on the Hetfield scale, the Phrygian scale?
It kind of sounded like it, but I don't know enough theory to back that up. But maybe somebody else listening to this might. But I really like this song. I think it's got a good groove to it.
I can't quickly find which track it is, but either Searching with My Good Eye Closed or Room 1,000 Years Wide is Kim's first lyrical credit. He wrote the lyrics to either Searching with My Good Eye Closed or Room 1,000 Years Wide.
Room 1,000 Years Wide basically kind of predates the record a little bit because they released it through Sub Pop initially. It was like a single. They had like I think they still do it where it's like a single of the month type of club. And so this was released in 1990, kind of leading up to the record. And it was released alongside a B-side, an unreleased B-side called HIV Baby. This was one of the first songs that they recorded with Ben and released with Ben. And then, it's one of the only songs on the record that doesn't have any like writing credit, like zero input from Chris Cornell. So you have lyrics by Kim and music by Matt.
It's a bummer that he didn't have a writing credit on this because it's not like he doesn't have enough as it is on the record. I mean, come on, every single. Shit.
There's basically two versions of this song. So they recorded it for that Sub Pop Singles Club, and then they re-recorded it for the album. And they have like the horn section, basically. You have Scart Granlund on saxophone and Ernst Long on trumpet. And they are on both versions of the song. They basically just call them out.
The saxophone is very melodic.
Oh, right. Yeah.
It's so when I heard the saxophone on this track, I thought of it's funny to hear saxophone on a record like this, right? Because it is a heavy record. It's not just a heavy record. Like there's some psychedelia, there's some like punk rock shit on here. But I always go back to, fast forward almost 20 years with a band called Rivers of Nile releasing an album called Where Owls Know My Name or No Name. There's saxophone on that record and people shit their pants over it. Like, oh my God, you're adding it to a death metal record like this. And I go back and hear this shit. I'm like, it's there. What's the big deal? It's just a fucking instrument.
It's cool. I mean, you think the Stooges did the same thing?
Yeah.
Like, why not? If it sounds cool. Fucking think of Siege, that power violence band from like Massachusetts.
Yeah.
They fucking, it's not, it's kind of similar to this where it's just fucking go for it, man. Like just add, I think there was a guy in the band who knew how to play saxophone and just fucking belted over some fucking riffs or whatever. But I like the saxophone on this record. Like it just adds to kind of some layers. It adds some little textures in there. Add some flavors.
Yeah.
As a great man once said in an episode of our show.
I was in a band in high school and we almost added tuba to an EP or demo that we did. We almost did it.
What kind of band was this?
It's a death metal band. Of course it fucking was. Of course it was, bud.
It wasn't I thought it was a polka band.
We were going to add tuba and layer it in there to be like this really kind of dense, dark kind of thing, and we couldn't quite figure it out. So we said, it's okay. Like we'll figure it out later. We just won't do it.
We'll figure it out later.
The verse riffs of Room 1,000 Years Wide are like maybe some of the simplest on the album, but I think they're not my favorite riffs. It's not my favorite riff. Holy Water is, but it's some of my favorite riffs.
There's something very modern sounding about Holy Water that I like a lot when we get to there. I don't, this is a 12-track record, so I don't want to skip over it because like all the tracks are pretty fucking good. Like this is like a 90 on the scale of like 1 to 100 to me. Mind Riot, when I first read the title of that track, I thought it said Mind Rot, which is, Mind Rot is the name of this really cool kind of post-metal band from the early 2000s. And I was like, fuck, did they pull their name from that? And I just never noticed. But Mind Riot, cool track. Definitely more of a psychedelia kind of track.
Yeah, is this the one we mentioned that has all the tuning
all E's?
All E's? Yeah, it's very open sounding. It's very open sounding for sure.
I love the kind of like hammer on, pull off riffs at the very beginning of the song. Also, that tuning kind of makes it like almost like a dulcimer a little bit, because there's a lot of droning, but the way dulcimers like necks are, it's like all in a major key, and if all your strings are like the same note, like it's kind of a cheat code. It's
yeah, you're never really going to hit a wrong note,
right?
It definitely adds that kind of vibe, that very droning kind of hypnotic vibe to it. You can almost get you can almost make the guitar sound like a different instrument just by tuning it slightly different. In that this might be, with that tuning, maybe it's one of the one of the more experimental tracks on the record.
Then apparently they never played it live because, like,
go figure,
they couldn't keep their guitars in tune.
Fucking go figure.
Amazing. Sounds great for the record, but yeah. Drawing Flies, another fun one, has some more sax appearances on this track in particular. The one thing that I really kind of notated for me when listening to it again was the vocal cadence of the track. I think was like kind of unique. Just like the way that he was kind of delivering some lyrics on this song in particular.
I love the last 3 tracks on this record, like unabashedly. That, like, I love the singles, I love the rest of the record, but for some reason, these last 3 tracks on this album are just fucking gold to me.
I love that they use the horns to kind of accentuate the like where the vocal patterns are hitting in the bridge.
They do that a couple times on this record where like there's like maybe it's a drum. The beat particulars, Outshine kind of does that too, where it's like really accentuating some of the delivery of the vocals. But yeah, I agree. I think that it's effective. It's effective on Drawing Flies for sure. And then we come to your favorite song, right?
This might be mine too, to be honest.
Yeah.
Why this song in particular? Why is this your favorite song on the record?
I just love that. Though all those versions of that verse riff, because they play that riff like 5 different ways just in the verse, but I love that riff.
It's heavy. When I'm listening to it, it sounds like sludge metal. Like there's some Iommi kind of style, little like hammer on, little like just little detailed touches there. I thought as well, just knowing the kind of connection with Thou, I think this would be a really fucking cool cover for Thou to do. Obviously 4th of July. That? Yeah, you hear that, Thou?
You hear that, Brian?
There's just some parts on here, like the bridge riff especially, that I feel like you could really, that would be a really cool, like you just slow it down. You do it the same, but you just slow it down a little bit, Thou. And I think you'd be onto something there for sure.
These last 3 tracks I like so much, primarily because they show there's different character traits of the band that really shine through in these last three. And these last three tracks remind me of kind of what modern day Mastodon sounds like. There's, I would say maybe from the Hunter on. So the Hunter, Once More Around the Sun, Emperor of Sand in particular, and Hushed and Grim. I can hear that influence from this album on those tracks. Very Bill Kelleher-esque kind of writing with it. And I heard that and I went, son of a bitch, the open kind of sounding notes that are in there, kind of the way the riff is structured. It's like, oh shit, like that's 100% like modern day Mastodon. It absolutely is. Holy Water is like, I know every time I listen to this album, I look down anytime that track's on and it's like, fuck, like this is every single time.
I think Chris wrote this song I think Chris wrote the Holy Water riff.
Of course he did. Of course he did. I mean, Jesus Christ. Next thing you know, we're going to be like, oh yeah, he created the recipe for peanut butter cookies that like, he just somehow created that and like, it just transfers time and space. Like,
did you know that Chris Cornell made the first cat video on the internet?
Jesus.
Chris Cornell invented everything that brings people joy. He actually invented serotonin. Did you know that Chris Cornell made serotonin?
Jesus. And you know, I love this record is so fun and so fucking good and so catchy. You know, I was obviously making a statement that it was a relatively longer record. It's an hour long, but it doesn't feel that way. It doesn't feel like a fucking slog. Like, you know, you can listen to it and go, oh shit, you know, I've got 2 songs left. Like, okay, it's no big deal. Get to the last track, New Damage, another heavy fucking track.
Yeah, it's got a really cool chromatic riff. Love it. It just kind of descends into madness, and it's got like some more wah touches on this as well. He's fucking screaming on this song as well. You know, it's a cool one.
That verse riff, another riff that's in 9 on this record, but also it reminds me of that Limo Wreck song that's on
Superunknown. It's this poor dude, Chris Cornell, this poor guy, extremely talented, lyrically, guitar wise, he's a drummer. I mean, shit. As I said earlier, the dude is not hard to look at. Had a successful career after the band split up in multi different ways. Like, Jesus Christ, the next thing we're gonna find out is like, oh yeah, on Superunknown, like, you know, he drove the band all to get new teeth or something like this. Like, we're just gonna find out some more shit about him.
He pulled 5 kids out of a burning building in the drive from Cleveland, Ohio to Tallahassee, Florida.
Jesus.
He stopped.
Yeah.
What, a Bam Bam Bigelow story or something?
And did an encore that night too.
God.
He was belching. You could see smoke coming out when he burped, but he still...
I guess I found out that there was another version of this song that they did for a compilation for Greenpeace, alternative NRG in '94, and I guess some of that kind of like environmental sort of ethics goes into the recording of this record because they did it with solar power, like maybe the studio was powered by solar power. So, but the thing about it was, if you know, the comp itself features like a lot of bands from this era. You got like L7, REM, Jesus and Mary Chain. I think even Sonic Youth and U2 were covered, like featured on this album. But what makes this particular version so interesting is that they collaborated with Brian May of Queen. Like, he flew out to the band's like rehearsal space to meet them. And, you know, here's this guy who's like very luxurious car, and he's like dressed super nice and out of place. And I guess he was a very nice man, and he was really down to collaborate with them. And that's what they did. And
Isn't he a fucking rocket scientist at this point?
He is. He does have
Seriously.
a doctorate. I think he has like a meta. I don't know if it may have been in physics or maybe it was a like medical type of thing. But yeah, the man
Jesus.
literally has a doctorate, and he also was in, every
One of the biggest bands on the fucking planet.
Yeah. So turns out they collaborated with each other, and it ended up on this comp. But other than that, like you said, the album runs just shy of an hour. They did the classic thing of writing as much as you could. There were a handful of songs that did not make it onto the actual final cut of the record. You have songs like Cold Bitch and Birth Ritual that were recorded during the sessions, didn't make it on the album. I think Birth Ritual did make it on the soundtrack for the movie that we talked about earlier, Singles. But yeah, it's better to have more than trying to force some tracks for the album, but they came in with a lot for sure.
It would be a bummer if we didn't like at least touch on the artwork a little bit for this record.
Yeah, the artwork and the name, but yeah, the name's great because it's like they had a bunch of different titles. I think that they were going to attempt to use
Samuel L. Jackson. That was the name of the record.
Was it really?
This is
That
Bad
was one of them?
Motherfucker. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well,
Yeah.
So at first I read they were going to call it "I'm Okay, Urinal Cake?" ? And I guess this is a reference to like a self-help book around the time. I'm okay, you're
God.
okay. But yeah, one of the ideas was Bad Motherfucker, one word. And so I think at one point someone was in a room listening to Bad Motor Scooter by Montrose, and somebody made the joke of like bad Motor Scooter, more like Bad Motorfinger, because somebody loved the band Bad Finger, and they just smashed them together basically.
Cody Thompson was there.
Yeah, Cody Thompson was there.
Montrose, Sammy Hagar, right?
So like an early Sammy Hagar bang. Yeah, Ronnie
Okay.
Montrose, Sammy Hagar on vocals. He's on that track for sure. Good riff. It sounds like literally when you listen to that song, it sounds like a scooter or like a vehicle revving up, which kind of ties into the Rusty Cage thing a little bit. I think the
tremolo
bass,
thing.
yeah, that was it. That was apparently what came out of that. You just smashing some words together. But the artwork for sure, I guess, was also created by kind of like a fellow musician from the Seattle area, Mark Dancy, who was in a band called Big Chief, and they played shows together. I think there was like some mention of playing a show with Tad at the time where they asked him to do the album artwork for the album. And there was a couple things that he had tried to do that they didn't like, but what he essentially came up with was this like circular kind of illustration or like design, which is basically just 12 middle fingers, 12 hands giving you the middle finger, that they kind of look, I don't know, you really have to look for it because it's all
I
jagged.
never would have
and
put that
you
together.
Never. So it's
Ever.
12 songs, 12 hands giving you the finger. And yeah, they just kind of look electrified and jagged in a circle.
I think they're reaching with that a little bit.
That's what he says. That's all I can,
It's like watching Bob's Burgers and they have the burger of the day ad on there, which is like this reoccurring joke in there. And there's
Yeah.
one that you'll see and it's like, that one's not hitting, man. That one's, you can say it all you want, but it's just not hitting.
The reception for the album, of course, was pretty good, pretty okay. It reached double platinum within a few years of its release.
Platinum within months or something like that.
Yeah, so double, and yeah, so it would sell like 2 million copies within a few years. Received their second Grammy nomination for Best Metal Performance at the Grammys in '92. Who do you think won that Best Metal Performance in '92, Dylan?
Only imagine who they would have lost to. The Grammys seem to have been trying to make up for a mistake made in 1989 for 35 fucking years. I'm just going to take a shot in the dark. It's 4 dudes from the Bay Area.
You'd be right. Yeah. Black Album, of course, was going to walk away with that
God.
one.
It's not even arguable. This record's better than the Black Album, guys.
Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah.
Like, I like the Black Album. Go back to the Megadeth episode.
This record was no slouch, though. Of course, you're getting radio play. Those videos were getting played all over MTV, with the exception, I think, of Jesus Christ Pose getting banned at one point just because of all the complaints that they got from, Christian groups or whatever. But
Fart sniffers.
yeah, there's some cool videos. I think it's safe to say that Superunknown is definitely the commercial massive success of this band. But, this is an album that basically sets the pace, as we mentioned earlier on in the episode, and probably holds a pretty special place in, just the musical journey that this band had in their career. I think this is definitely like a very important album for all of those guys.
They speak really fondly of this time, like of this record in particular. And I know I'd read maybe some interviews later on for like the Superunknown album cycle. And maybe there was maybe that's when some tension started to kind of arise for that record. But that's not the takeaway from the fact of like Superunknown has the band's biggest hit of all time, which is Black Hole Sun. I almost said Black Number One, has Black Hole Sun on it. And like, turn on fucking public rock radio and you won't, tell me you won't hear that, or classic rock radio at this point. And like, you're probably going to hear that in the queue at some point throughout the day. But I do believe, and I'm biased because this is my favorite record by them, that this might have been kind of like a weird peak for the band, with like, they were firing on all cylinders at it. Everybody was really happy with the outcome of it. And I started to maybe see that kind of wane a little bit with like maybe just internal wise with the Superunknown stuff. But you also have like, yeah, there's some tension in the band, but you've got the best record of their career, like the best selling album of their career with Superunknown. Is Fell on Black Days on Superunknown as well? Like you've got Fell on Black Days, you've got Black Hole Sun, Spoon Man.
The Day I Tried to Live.
Yep. Yes. The Day I Tried to Live. 4th of July. Covered by Thou many years later. Like this record set them up for that, right? Like they had to get this record done and out for people to see, to go like, oh, okay, maybe we can go a little bit further in this kind of like, not necessarily experimental side, but maybe more of a like songwriting kind of style.
I think also another big piece of this too is that they probably were playing this. This was maybe like the first record where they were playing to massive audiences, that everybody like heard this record, not only on the radio and on MTV, but they were on some huge tours. They opened for Guns N' Roses on the Use Your Illusions tour.
That fucking like snake bit tour from the beginning, the Use Your Illusion tour. James Hetfield gets burnt to death. They've had multiple openers. A lot of people mad. Faith No More was opening some of those dates with them.
Yeah, this is I read the longest tour that GNR ever did, but also perhaps one of the longest rock tours in history. I mean, this thing went from January of 91 to July of 93. And so, yeah, you have like a bunch of different bands that were like supporting this tour. Some of the bands that were asked that declined were Nirvana. They were asked first. They didn't want to do that.
That's when they had their little spat. That's right.
Yeah. And Pearl Jam was also asked to open this tour as well. Mm-hmm. They also declined. So Soundgarden was just like, why not? We could do that. Why the fuck not?
Didn't Alice in Chains open up a couple dates of this
I think
the Use Your Illusion tour?
I think they were also on this tour. Yeah.
God, I mean, I feel like at one point you had Faith No More, Soundgarden, the really heavy band from the 80s that's kind of like really loud classic rock. Bob Rock produced The Cult. The Cult opened for this as well. And then you have like Metallica as an opener, I guess. I don't know if that was the co-headlining portion, but like, Jesus Christ, like that tour literally went on longer than the band lasted after that album.
They apparently didn't have much time off. Even when they did have a traditional day off from a day of tour, they would just try to find a club to play. So they were always playing. They were just so sharp, always doing something. But I feel like they mentioned that the tour where they felt like the band really came into their own as a live band was the Lollapalooza tour that year as well. The 92, July through September. This is a tour that also included Pearl Jam as well. The main stage had Red Hot Chili Peppers, Ministry, Ice Cube, Jesus and Mary Chain, Lush. Some of the side stage acts, it's crazy to say, but Rage Against the Machine, Tool, Porno for Pyros, Temple of the Dog, House of Pain, and a ton more.
So, are you saying that maybe Chris met the Rage Against the Machine guys on this tour? and maybe that like culminated in some sort of relationship later on? Are we saying that at all? No, can't be. Can't be.
I saw an interview on MTV where they said on that Lollapalooza tour that they Soundgarden was covering Cop Killer by fucking Body Count.
I remember it may have been the first Lollapalooza tour. Body Count was on it with Rollins' band. And like, I think they used to like call Henry out to do Cop Killer with them.
They were on, that was like a wild story in the Henry and Heidi podcast where they were like talking about bands coming out and jamming with each other. The Butthole Surfers with the fake gun that would looked real, and they would have the PA set up for like to make it sound like a gunshot, and like Gibby's just with this gun at the crowd. What a band.
Bow.
Sounds like a horrible idea.
I bet it was. It's the 90s, man. You get away with shit.
Any final thoughts on this album, on this band? Like, really, what can you say? Have you been turned, swindled? Is this with all this discussion? No, all right, okay.
Easy.
Well, I guess I'll shut up.
It definitely hasn't turned me the other direction by any means. I love this record so much. So much. It's still number 2 for me. I can't like merge into that top spot yet. It's going to take a lot of listening. I will say this, in listening and getting prepared for this episode, I listened to the first Audioslave record for the first time in years.
Riffs
aplenty, but like almost 10 years, maybe even 11 years after this album came out. And the dude is still like hitting stupid notes. I was really going to try and get a Like a Stone joke in the Upon Stone review, but it just didn't culminate very well. But this cemented where the band was going. This cemented that the band was something. It wasn't just like kind of a punk metal hybrid. It was like, oh no, this band has something. This album put the band's name on the tip of everybody's tongue. Like, yeah, some of the guys in the know knew them from Louder Than Love and like some of their earlier output, like Ultra Mega OK. And we're really adamant about like everyone needs to hear Soundgarden. But as years go by, you release Badmotorfinger, and then it's all right, what's next? Whatever's next has to trump Badmotorfinger. And it did. Superunknown was debuted top of the Billboard charts, 6 times platinum or something like that. It's probably their crowning achievement record, but it's kind of like describing only so many bands get 2 records that could identify the band, right? This band just has 2. You've got Superunknown, Badmotorfinger.
Yeah. I mean, I love this album. I fucking picked it. I just also love Superunknown, and I love Superunknown a little bit more than Badmotorfinger.
Fair enough. You're wrong, but that's all right. Episode's over now.
This album has more riffs, and it's like punkier and weirder and a little heavier. I personally feel like the songwriting is more polished in Superunknown, which might take, to some people, it might take like some of the fun out of the album. Like there aren't really fucking weird parts like face pollution in Superunknown. But I just think I like it more. I don't fucking know, man. I like it more.
I like it. I listen to both of them. I'm giving you shit, but there's really no wrong answer. You kind of get the best of both worlds where you have like an hour long of just fun experimentation, and then you have the next record, which refined, and it's a good record, and there's great songwriting. So I want to hear from you. What did you think? Which one's better? It doesn't really matter.
Why
but
am I wrong?
Why is Swindle wrong? Comment below. Love it. All right, this is a part of the episode where we like to share some things we've been listening to, some things we think you should be checking out. I only got one. I kind of like in a previous episode, I've been just revisiting some older records that I really like. I'm really stuck on Nails, Abandon All Life. I'm really excited that Todd Jones going to be making a new album this year, maybe next. We'll see. We're kind of reuniting with Kurt Ballou at God City to the next chapter of Nails. So this was a huge record for me when it came out. Just absolutely pummeling. Very abrasive sounding album. It's dirty. It's nasty. Doesn't make you feel amazing, but it's got riffs and it rules.
My rec is an album from 2023. I think the band name is pronounced Maafa, Maafa. It's an all-black hardcore band. Again, happy Black History Month. There's African percussion instruments in this album, just layered into the punk, fast 3-chord hardcore stuff. It's fun. It's quick. Happy Black History Month.
So I have 2 this week. First off, I want to stick with the kind of grunge vibe in preparation for this record. You know, we've mentioned this band, I think, in every grunge episode we've done, and we will at some point touch on this band and do an episode on this band. But I want to talk about Tad. In my opinion, 4th best grunge band. And I want to talk about their 1993 record, Inhaler. Great album. Has a song called Greasebox on it. It's the opening track. Fucking heavy record. Very simplistic, kind of punky with these really aggro, like just primal driving riffs on it. And Tad Doyle's fucking cool as shit. The dude sounds like how he looks, and I like that when bands are like that. Austin, you and I actually got to see him in a older band of his called Brothers of the Sonic Cloth when they opened for Neurosis. Tad, go check out any of their records, their sub pop outlook or their sub pop output. God's Balls is always a fun record to listen to. The debut album's fun. Very short records, very punky. The second record I have is a black metal record, big fucking shocker, by an artist called, I'm going to butcher this pronunciation, Narcissus. They're Austrian. The album is called Act 3, Erschlong. Feel like I'm doing a Dwight Schrute impersonation here. It's very melodic kind of black metal, has a lot of like traditional folk instrumentation influence. I'm assuming it's probably folk to Austria. But it's very like Dissection-esque, kind of bombastic sounding. The production's very organic sounding. Like it honestly just sounds like a 6505 amp just cranked up really loud and like with the gain dimed out on it. Like it sounds really cool. The vocals are really good on it. This was a recommendation from, I follow this Twitter page called New Millennium Cyanide Kep, and he's always like throwing new shit out there to listen to. And this was just one I happened to see and catch on to.
Great. Well, check it all out. Links to those songs can be found in this episode. We'll be back next week with some more riffs to talk about. Follow us at Distortion891, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, where you can follow us for all updates on this show, as well as our sister program, Vocal Distortion, which airs live on FM 89, 6 p.m. Central. Let us know what you want us to talk about next. You can comment below. We'd love to chat with y'all and cover some albums that you really love. But until then, I'm Austin for Dylan Swindle. You've been listening to Riff Worship. So, bye.